Good morning. We are here at Trackers Earth's private wilderness sanctuary, the Bull Run Educational Center. My name is Jess Liotta. I am a mushroom forager and I've been collaborating with Trackers for a long time. Trackers has been around for about 20 years and teaches both kids and adults how to connect with the outdoors, how to build relationships with nature, and I think that mushroom foraging is a great way to do that. Currently, I teach mushroom classes with them during the fall months, and they invited me to come out here and show you guys around a little bit, maybe see what kind of mushrooms we can find today, and talk a little bit about how we set ourselves up for success when we're going out foraging, both in terms of maybe what we bring with us and then what we look for once we're out in the forest. So what I have here are my standard collection of things that I take out with me whenever I'm going to be foraging. I really like strong waterproof layers because it gets wet out there, even if it's not actually raining, which today it's not. When you are walking through waist-high sword ferns that have been rained on, it just shakes water and soaks you to the bone. So these are not super breathable because if water can't come in, it also can't go out, but I still really like them. These are Helly Hansen's. I found them to be the most durable and the most waterproof. I also use these gaiters. These go over my shoes and around the lower parts of my pants. These are like absolute game changers when I started using gaiters. These Velcro in the front and they clip around your bottom. Clip it down. My toes can still get a little wet, but my pants aren't pulling that up through the side. Everyone has different preferences. Some people want a little more breathability, and there are so many rain jackets, rain pants, bottom layers, and things you can choose from. So, you know, whatever works for you. This is what I really like, but my husband wants stuff that's a little more breathable, so everyone's a little different. I carry this little Garmin InReach. There's a few different, again, satellite options. I can send text messages via satellite with this, so if I am somewhere way out of reach, I can text my spouse, I can text my friend. I've never needed to use it for an emergency situation, but if you press the SOS button, search and rescue will come and find you, and they will take you out of wherever you are. So always, always, always I have this fully charged and clipped to my front because I'm out by myself most of the time. I've got my little mushroom bags. The people use baskets, they use canvas bags. I don't recommend anything plastic or super unbreathable for a couple of reasons. If you're foraging in the rain or when it's been raining, which if there are mushrooms, it's probably been raining, they can get kind of gross and manky in the bag, so you want to have some breathability. Also, when you carry a mesh bag or a basket, anything that has something where the wind and air can pass through, all the spores from the mushrooms that you collect are going to be releasing the entire time you're carrying them around. And there is some evidence, there have been studies done on this, that when people are foraging in an area and they're carrying them around and they're behaving otherwise responsibly, the mushroom production of that area will go up over time. So foraging properly can actually encourage mycelial activities. This is the classic mushroom forager's knife. I've used mine for so long. It actually used to have a little brush on the end and all the little hairs fell out of the brush last year, but I've had it for years and years and I love it. I also have this backpack. Any backpack is fine. You don't need a specific one. I do like this one a lot for a couple reasons. It has a hydration pack insert and lots of little pockets that I can shove my mushroom bags in. But the thing I really like about this one is it unzips all the way down through the middle. And that means that when I have some mushrooms that I found, I can put them gently in the bottom without having to kind of shove all the way down. And when I'm taking them out, I can remove them really gently again so they don't get damaged, minimally jostled, that kind of thing. Plus there's this nice little waterproof zipper situation, which is pretty cool when it's rainy. When you pull up down the forest road and you're looking out your window and thinking, is this a good spot? These are some of the ways that I can judge whether or not it's worth my time to at least get out and look around. So you can sort of see this type of forest is often what I'm looking for. It's pretty open. You see those sword ferns, you see some amount of ground cover. I definitely want to see a lot of moss on the ground because when you can see moss, then you can see where the mushrooms are growing. If there are too many ferns, maybe there are mushrooms there, you're not going to see them though. So you need to make sure you have at least some amount of visibility between the trees. The type of trees are also really helpful. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we're looking in predominantly conifer forests. We're looking for Doug fir, hemlock, maybe some cedars, some pines. That's the type of tree that you really need to see. A few deciduous trees, that's fine, but if what you're seeing is predominantly maple trees, alder trees, all those beautiful fall colors, that is not typically the area where the fungi we're looking for are going to associate and grow. And also, they're going to drop so many leaves on the ground that are exactly the same color as a chanterelle that you're never gonna find anything also. The other thing I like to look for is relatively flat land, because it is exhausting to scramble up and down steep hills all day. The mushrooms will potentially grow on them, but you'll be so tired that you're not gonna have as much of a good time. There are topo maps that you can use. Even Google Maps has a topographical layer you can turn on, so you can sort of scout in advance where you might be going and say, all right, this looks like it has some big flat areas, and then you can go and check it out, see if it has the right trees, and then maybe it's worth getting out and looking around. My ideal mushroom hunting day is it's rained about 14 to 10 days beforehand, maybe been a little bit dry but not too hot since then. If you see one mushroom, there's probably other mushrooms. It's a good sign to at least take some time, see what else is there. If you don't find anything, you know, after 20, 30 minutes of walking around, maybe a good idea to pull up and try a different location, but it's an encouraging first sign. This is a lobster mushroom, which is very cool because it's actually two species in one. A lobster mushroom happens when a parasitic fungus, Hypomyces lactiflorum, colonizes a different mushroom called Rusula brevettis. Normally just a pretty boring white mushroom. It's technically edible, but not very flavorful. But when it gets infected with this opportunistic fungi, it changes shape, it changes color, and it changes flavor. And so these are not only called lobster mushrooms because they're orange, they have kind of a light seafoody kind of aroma to them. When they're old, it's not very pleasant, but when they're fresh, it's a really nice, just a very light aroma. You can cook these in all kinds of ways. People like to make bisque out of them, creamy soups. I put them in mac and cheese, actually, that's my favorite. It is very typical and recommended for novice foragers to pick a species like this, get to know it pretty well. You get to know where will you find it, what will it look like. If there are lookalikes, that means mushrooms that grow in a similar form or shape, how do you distinguish those two things? Once you're comfortable with one species, you can add another species. Chanterelles are kind of the other common one that people start with in our area because there are kind of lookalikes, but you can learn the differentiating features fairly easily, and none of the things that look like chanterelles will do you great harm. The worst case scenario is you're going to feel a little bad in the stomach, maybe have an unpleasant day on the toilet. You will not be permanently harmed. So people move on to that, they get to know those species, and then on from there. All mushrooms have a life cycle, and oftentimes there is a point during that life cycle when they're the most pleasant to eat. As they age, they get darker and more of a reddish, almost like a wine-colored purple. That's usually by the time they hit this color, they're not going to be pleasant. This one is pretty clearly past prime, but you'll be able to see there's some little bug holes in there, that it's just all starting to be really soft inside. Versus, we've got our prime specimen. This, I'm gonna even thump it here. It has a really solid, almost a woody sound to it when you knock on it. And when you squeeze it, I'm squeezing this pretty hard, and nothing's happening. There's no give. It's got a really firm texture. When they're just starting to go, if you squeeze it and they go fall apart, probably just want to throw it back. I like to do field cleaning where really you're just carving off some of those dirty bits. A cleaner mushroom in your bag is going to be cleaner mushrooms at home. The lobsters, sometimes there's not as much you can do about this stuff up on the top, but you can use the tip to pull out some of these bigger bits of duff. It's just less work to do later on. Sometimes it's easier to do once they've dried a bit, so if it's really wet and I foraged a lot of mushrooms, I'll actually spread a big towel out on the table at home and lay them all out just to dry for an hour or two, because this stuff comes off so much more easily when it's not damp. But you can see you've got a solid interior. You don't see any little bug holes. It would be pretty obvious if it had been colonized by creatures. You want to throw it back at that point. There's also a scent difference with lobsters. So once they go further into their life cycle, they really, it's like old fish, and it's not appealing. So it will be very obvious to you if you take a sniff, not very tempting. Versus this, it's just got a very woodsy, kind of earthy, mushroomy, very lightly fishy, but not unpleasantly so odor. Kind of like fresh seafood, just kind of brisk. Not a very fun mushroom to find, but it is important to know what it is. Here we have Amanita phalloides, also known as the deathcap. It is invasive to our region. It is not native to here. It has that little sac around the bottom, and then it pops up. It's got this annular ring, and then the top ranges from kind of a lemony yellow with green tinges to kind of this sort of brownish, tannish, muddy yellow green. It is deadly toxic. Luckily not easily confusable with anything that we have growing here that you're likely to be looking for. It's still good to know about. It is increasingly common in our region, including in urban areas. I actually know a few parking lots and different sort of outdoor parky spaces in Portland that have these growing in them. Good to familiarize yourself with them and know what they are. Keep your dogs away from them. Unfortunately, there's not much you can do about getting rid of them short of excavating the entirety of the soil in a given area and trucking it out. They're sadly here to stay, so we have to learn how to live with them and be safe around them. It is always safe to touch a mushroom. That is not going to harm me. You really have to consume an entire one, usually more than one, in order to be harmed. So I have no hesitation touching it. Obviously, if you have small children, you need to watch them because anything can go in a mouth. Pulling a mushroom out of the ground or cutting it, there is no difference. I'm sure that I would get flamed on some mushroom forums for saying that, but there is no direct evidence that suggests there is really any difference between pulling and cutting in terms of the health of the overall mycelial organism. You have to think of this as like a single apple or cherry on a giant tree, and you will not harm a tree by pulling an apple. There is so much more of this organism that we cannot see than there is popping up here out of the ground. So if you want to identify something, pick it up, take a look at it. You are not harming anything. You can always put it back and it'll decompose in place. Perhaps the animals will eat it. It's actually really essential for a lot of species. You have to see what's going on down here, and that includes some of the really dangerous ones. I got into foraging mushrooms because I really like three things. I like being outside, I love to cook and eat, and I really like knowing things. So that really spoke to my interest. Being able to walk around in the forest and say, I know what that is, I know what that is. Very cool feeling, especially when you get to, I know what that is and it's delicious. All very cool and excellent. We have a wonderful local mycological society, the Oregon Mycological Society. They do guided forays and outings and trips. That's a wonderful place to get started. They'll have an experienced trip leader there to help you identify things and help you learn the lay of the land. There are also many wonderful books. I recommend some in the blog that I wrote, and you can look those up. Mushrooms of Cascadia was just released, and I think that's probably my favorite. It's written by Noah Siegel and Christian Schwartz, and they are the absolute experts, and it has the most up-to-date terminology, edibility information. It's really quite cutting edge. And really, I encourage you to take matters into your own hands. Really do your diligence. Learn how to identify things with the proper terminology, using proper identification keys, and really go deep and have fun.